If anyone is going to be charged and forced to remain in jail, forced to be serving prison time for obstructing an official proceeding, then Jamaal Bowman should face the exact same fate for every single January 6th defendant. He should have told Capitol Police immediately that he made a mistake, as he claimed. But it wasn't a mistake, Mr. Speaker. It was on purpose. It was intentional.
Mr. Speaker, it's really rich to get a lecture from someone about civility who stood on this House floor and screamed and interrupted the President of the United States during his State of the Union, or somebody who continues to circle the wagons and cheer on the insurrectionists who attacked this Capitol violently on January 6th. I was the last person off the House floor on that day, and I saw what happened. And for people to come down here and defend those actions, it is pathetic and disgusting. What happened in this chamber last month, putting everything on hold for 3 weeks as House Republicans failed time and time again to elect a speaker, that was not democracy. All the drama and all the chaos of the Republican conference over the last few weeks, that was not democracy. Shutting down half of the United States Congress, immobilizing our national legislature at a time of global turmoil, that is actually the exact opposite of democracy. I keep hearing from my colleagues across the aisle they claim that not having a speaker for 3 weeks was somehow democracy in action. That's a bunch of baloney. Some of them even said that this impasse made our country look good on the world stage. Are you kidding me? What planet do they live on? Their dysfunction makes us look like idiots. The American people elected all of us to come here and to represent their interests and their ideals. That is democracy. They didn't send us here to play student government. They didn't send us here to sit around and yell at each other about who gets to be speaker as if this were Lord of the Flies. They sent us here to work, to govern, to get things done.
Since this phenomenon of biological men participating in women's sports is relatively new, it is a problem that will only continue to get worse if we don't act to stand up on their behalf.
This movement, Mr. Speaker, is making a mockery of their brave dedication and overall progress for women in general. Just like in our debate where we had to denounce socialism on this floor, just like our debate where we had to defend the lives of abortion survivors, we are here to protect America.
Republicans want to ban trans kids from sports, but they won't ban child marriage in states like West Virginia and Tennessee. The same party systematically taking away women's reproductive rights across the country. The same party that won't lift a finger as our kids are massacred in our schools. That takes NRA blood money instead of addressing an actual problem like gun violence. Now wants to use protecting girls as their sick excuse for targeting trans kids. Enough is enough. Stop the fear-mongering.
I would remind everyone that House Republicans are the only ones who've taken up concrete action to avoid default. Together, we're doing something good for the nation. We're avoiding a devastating default on the national debt, and we're enacting needed fiscal reforms to put us on a more sustainable spending path.
Frankly, we should not be here. We should have taken care of this months ago. But once again, Republicans are demonstrating that they cannot govern. Republicans have used this manufactured crisis to force policy changes that are so unpopular that they could not possibly get them through on regular order. And for some on the far right, and there's a lot of them over there, this bill isn't mean enough. Is this a joke? George Santos allegedly stole almost $25,000 in unemployment benefits. And here's the part that you can't make up. This is too absurd to be true, but it is. Their bill defunds the program that catches people who commit this kind of fraud. I have a letter in front of me from the Department of Labor, which I will insert into the record, that says their bill defunds the program that helps them catch fraud. Now, maybe that's why George Santos co-sponsored it. But I think we should rename this the George Anthony DeValder Santos Fraudster Protection Act. What's that old horror movie saying? The call is coming from inside the House. You're going after fraud, but the fraud is coming from inside the Republican conference. Deal with that.
The reality is you can't stop these tragedies with a ban. You have to change the way we protect our children. I would encourage the other side of the aisle to co-sponsor my bill to change the default setting here in this country, which makes it illegal to even be near a school and have a firearm, which makes it harder for states to set policies that would save our children. And all it does is make felons of law-abiding gun owners.
People are so sick and tired of where our priorities are. People are sick and tired of having the National Rifle Association and all their money dictate what our policy should be on guns. They don't care about all the people that have died and have been murdered in this country. By the way, other countries have similar challenges and problems that we do. They don't have the level of gun violence. They don't have massacres on a regular basis. And this is what we get. Enough.
But we sit here with 4 bills that will fund almost 75% of the government when added to Milcon VA. Let's do our job. Let's work to move the DHS bill. Let's work together to figure out how to deal with the border. But to be very clear, we must address the border. That is a non-negotiable truth, that we must address the border. We can sit around a table and debate how, but we must address it.
Madam Speaker, forgive me, but what the hell is going on around here? We just heard the gentleman from Texas scream talking points that sound like they were written in Mar-a-Lago, you know, but this is crazy. I can't believe I have to say this, but the federal government of the United States is shutting down on Saturday because a handful of MAGA Republicans didn't get everything they wanted. And I got to tell you, that's a bad thing. It's a bad thing for our country. What the hell is going on in your conference? Because the truth is that under Speaker McCarthy's weak leadership, this Republican majority is a total failure, an unmitigated disaster. Those aren't even my words. That's what one of your own members said on TV a few nights ago about the process playing out in this chamber right now.
Some of your colleagues, Matt Gaetz, Matt Rosendale called it a continuation of Nancy Pelosi's budget and Joe Biden's policies. Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's a no. The list goes on. What do you make of this mess right now?
Well, it's an unmitigated disaster right now on the majority side. Look, I'm fearful of what this leads to.
The only way this slim House Republican majority can keep the lights on is if they get Senate Democrats and the president to agree. But they haven't even begun to reach across the aisle to negotiate because they're busy negotiating amongst themselves. Hell, at this rate, they might not even be able to get Senate Republicans to agree, given how extreme their conference has become.
Since President Biden took office, gas prices are up 60%. Natural gas prices are up 25%. Coal prices are up 70%. And electricity prices are up 24%. This should raise alarms on the other side of the aisle. And I don't mean pulling fire alarms. This should just get the attention of the other side. Finally, this legislation rescinds $5.58 billion of absolutely reckless spending that was wasted by the previous majority. It terminates Biden's Waters of the United States rule, and it cuts the dangerous, radical, extreme Green New Deal programs.
They say it's about woke Democrats this and woke Democrats that. I mean, give me a break. They want to get rid of an office here on Capitol Hill which promotes staff diversity and inclusion. Like, who wants less diversity? If you want everyone here to look the same, just say so. They want to make it illegal to put a pride flag up next to a U.S. flag, by the way, at an embassy during Pride Month. That's woke? I mean, like, what's wrong with them? In one of these bills, they want to make it so that you can use taxpayer money to fire people for being gay. I mean, really? I mean, with all the problems in the world, this is what they focus on? This is what keeps them awake at night? This is nuts. This isn't about religious freedom. This is about giving people freedom to discriminate. And if they want to be bigoted, so be it. But don't use the United States government and taxpayer dollars to reinforce and spread your backward views. Scientists are telling us we need to do more on climate change, and yet we are passing messaging bills about gas stoves. By the way, that's not even me calling them messaging bills. It's a Republican saying that. And I quote, this is a Republican, "We do not need to leave D.C. early because messaging bills are not coming to the House floor." That was Congresswoman Boebert last week. Or how about this one, and I quote, "When we pass things around here that are messaging bills that don't do anything, is it really a loss that we aren't passing anything?" End quote. I mean, their own members are saying that the bills that they are passing do nothing. That we're essentially they're just playing a messaging game. Is this really the best we can do with all the challenges that we face in this country and around the world?
Mr. Speaker, House Republicans have made a promise to the American people. We promise to deliver single-subject appropriations bills that responsibly fund government by cutting wasteful spending and investing in necessary services. H.R. 4820 and H.R. 4821 will cut billions in unnecessary government spending and prevent overreaching regulations while prioritizing vital programs. The Appropriations Committees made these cuts by rejecting the administration's request to increase bureaucracy and their request to increase wasteful climate and equity initiatives.
I don't know how anybody could come here with a straight face and say that this is good legislating. The only thing that is good is the fact that they're so extreme that even Senate Republicans are not going to take any of this garbage seriously. It further harms our environment and ignores the impact of climate change. I mean, open your eyes, I would say to my Republican friends. If you don't believe that climate change is real now, then you're hopeless. You're hopeless. You should go retire. You're not fit to be here. One of our Republican colleagues on this committee took to the House floor and said as much, and I quote,
"Nothing but excuses. Nothing but empty promises." And I'm in an empty chamber because everybody wants to go home and have their turkey. And we haven't done anything. When are we going to act like a Republican majority and start fighting? When are we going to do anything to truly cut spending instead of playing games? One thing. I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, one, that I can go campaign on and say we did. One. Anybody sitting in the complex, if you want to come down to the floor and come explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done besides, well, I guess it's not as bad as the Democrats.
My colleague was here a minute ago, but maybe he's back down on the floor waiting for somebody to tell him the one thing that the Republican majority has accomplished. Enough! I mean, enough! The Republican leadership of this House is incompetent. I mean, they're so incompetent it takes my breath away. They're letting the clowns run the circus. It is time the Speaker of the House develop a spine and stand up to the most extreme elements on the Republican side and actually sit down and negotiate an agreement that deals with the reality of our government. The Republicans only control barely just one branch of our government. The House. The Senate's under Democratic control. The White House is run by a Democrat. You're going to have to negotiate, and you're moving in the wrong direction. Time is running out. Stop this nonsense. Get serious. Get to the negotiating table. Enough of this.
Representative Jamaal Bowman of New York knowingly pulled a fire alarm to cause chaos and stop the House from doing its business. This is a felony, plain and simple. Mr. Bowman should know the consequences of pulling a fire alarm to cause panic. In New York schools, the policy is clear. When a student commits a crime on campus, police are called and that student is either suspended or expelled. One would think Representative Bowman would be able to hold himself to the same standards as he held his students to. I don't think that's a lot to ask.
Mr. Speaker, this is a profoundly stupid resolution. Under Republican control, this chamber has become a place where trivial issues get debated passionately and important ones not at all. Republicans have focused more on censuring people in this Congress than passing bills that help people we represent or improving this country in any way. What a waste of time and money. They have turned this place into a joke. They came into the majority talking a big game, but have delivered nothing, not a single damn thing. They talk about passing this and passing that. All their hyper-partisan bills are going nowhere. What we're now doing is distracting from the fact that the Republican agenda has been a total and complete failure.
House Resolution 918 formalizes an inquiry into whether sufficient grounds exist for the House of Representatives to exercise its constitutional power to impeach the President of the United States. With today's resolution, we're ensuring that the House will be able to complete its inquiry. We will secure the evidence we need and uncover the facts we need to make the full and fair determination. And only at the end of the road can we make a decision on how to proceed.
We are here for one reason and one reason alone. Donald Trump demanded that Republicans impeach, so they are going to impeach. These guys, these Republicans, they don't work for you, the American people. They work for Donald Trump. He says jump, they respond how high. This whole thing is an extreme political stunt. It has no credibility, no legitimacy, and no integrity. It is a sideshow, a distraction from the fact that Republicans have done nothing. They have the wrong priorities. The American people think they are failing miserably, and Republicans need a diversion. So they are weaponizing and abusing impeachment, one of the most somber and serious things that Congress can do to attack President Joe Biden. I get it. They're upset Donald Trump lost. Some of them still don't believe he lost. Many of them are upset that his violent insurrection did not succeed on January 6th. And today they want to finish the job. This is a continuation of their crusade to overturn the election. They have spent a year dredging up every conspiracy you can imagine against Joe Biden. And still, their own investigation, their own members, their own witnesses, their own internal documents all say President Joe Biden is a man of integrity who follows the law. Every single one of their crazy claims has been exhaustively debunked. Yet here we are. The only thing they've uncovered is that Joe Biden is a good dad, that he loves his family. His son Hunter lost his mom and sister in a terrible car accident, lost his brother to cancer. He experienced a lot of trauma, and sadly, he got caught up with drugs. And Republicans are weaponizing this addiction and using it to attack President Biden, a man of decency and integrity. Frankly, it's one of, if not the most despicable things I've seen in my whole career here in Congress. You know, Republicans talk about an open and transparent process. Give me a break. Yesterday, Rules Committee Republicans blocked Democrats from adding the words open and transparent to this resolution. They voted against requiring a single open hearing. They didn't even put our amendment in the official committee report. I've never seen anything like that. They're so afraid of openness and transparency that they are literally trying to hide our amendments from the public record. They don't want an open and transparent process. They're allergic to transparency. They want no transparency so they can go on Fox News, distort the facts, and keep this whole ridiculous charade going. Their whole investigation is built on lies. It's an extreme political stunt designed to distract from how incompetent Republicans are and how obsessed they are with Donald Trump, a twice impeached ex-president who's been indicted more times than he's been elected. How pathetic. With that, I reserve my time. The Republican Party no longer represents a coherent political ideology that seeks to solve problems or govern. They just want to scream and yell about how this place is broken when they're the ones who broke it. They want to use crisis and scandal to mask their own selfishness and sedition and to cover up their own incompetence and ineffectiveness. But the American people see through it. They know this Republican majority is a disaster, a national embarrassment. They have normalized dysfunction. But my message to my Republican colleagues and to Speaker McCarthy today is simple. Do your job. Do your job. Pay our bills on time, stop messing around with the debt ceiling, and do your job. Speaker McCarthy promised a more open, transparent, and regular process, yet on a major, consequential bill like this, we get none of those things. Maybe that's why we're moving so fast. Maybe Speaker McCarthy doesn't want people to realize what's in this bill. And I don't blame him. This is a ransom note to the American people that makes devastating, draconian cuts to programs that help the poor, the hungry, the sick, and the vulnerable, children, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities.
Socialism is a harmful ideology that is opposed to everything the United States stands for.
Young people in America are being brainwashed by the news media and academia. And the problem is that they're falling for it. They're believing it. Every socialist is a dictator in disguise. We cannot let this evil ideology take hold in this country.
What is this, the Red Scare? I mean, I have to say this is about the stupidest bill I've ever seen. Just a stupid, stupid, stupid bill. It lays out all of these awful people and then says we're, quote, rejecting the implementation of socialist policies in the United States of America. And nobody, not a single person so far, has been willing to clarify for me what exactly that means. What the hell are they talking about?
Democrats understand that their Green New Deal agenda is politically toxic as far as the American public is concerned. They know that their radical energy agenda has been exposed and laid bare to the American people. Democrats and their radical environmental NGO allies will continue to work in the shadows, strong-arming and intimidating corporations and investors alike.
Don't pretend this actually does anything. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for my Republican colleagues, to be honest. 2 years to put this together, the number one issue for the American people, and this is what they come up with? A book report on inflation. Now, I guess when you have no plans, when you have no real ideas, you'll do anything to say you did something. And that's all this is, a talking point, a press release, and a total waste of time. Apparently, the bar is on the ground for this new House majority, and it's a real shame. You'll see I'm wearing an orange ribbon today because June is Gun Violence Awareness Month. And instead of trying to stop mass shootings, instead of working to protect Americans from gun violence, this committee now is advancing a bill that would make it easier for the next mass shooter to kill people. I mean, give me a break. We are considering it because Speaker McCarthy is trying to put down a far-right rebellion. So we will vote on a bill to make it easier to kill people. He has given away everything to a small group of radical Republicans who will continue to demand more and more from him, apparently now including letting them dictate exactly what bills come to the floor.
Nowhere in this bill is it banning any books. Nowhere. Juliet Takes a Breath discusses a woman's journey coming out as a lesbian and contains graphic descriptions of sexual encounters. It's good that Americans' parents are taking a stand now. They're pushing back on these kind of books that I don't think they're going to mention.
Republicans keep saying, as they just did, that nothing in this bill has anything to do with banning books. We keep hearing it over and over and over. We've heard the same thing in state after state as Republicans have passed bills like this. Now, I have a few books that Republicans want to ban. There's too many to go through now, but let me recite a few. The Life of Rosa Parks. Who is Sojourner Truth? The biography of Nelson Mandela, and the story of Harvey Milk. Now, do you notice any pattern here? They want to ban books about black and brown people, and they want to ban books about LGBTQI+ people. It is sick. It is hateful. What's wrong with them, Mr. Speaker? And I'm furious, and I'm not just furious for me. I'm furious for the people he lied to. I'm furious for the memory of the officers he insulted. I'm furious for the police officers who were beaten and injured that day. I'm furious for the staff who thought that they were going to die. January 6th was an attack on our democracy, and now Tucker Carlson has chosen to side with the enemies of democracy. So when the hell will House Republicans stand up here and say, this is wrong?
Democrats in Albany and Washington, they've locked away the promise of natural gas production. They've blocked the construction of oil and gas pipelines, and they are now leading the way on banning natural gas to our homes. H.R. 1 promises to unleash the power of our nation's energy sector once again.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I mean, the way everybody's yelling and screaming over there, you'd think that they want to have a debate on ideas. We had another mass shooting yesterday, but Republicans won't lift a finger because of the gun lobby. We had another train derailment this week, but Republicans won't lift a finger because of the polluters. Our planet is on fire, but Republicans won't lift a finger because of big oil. Their bill literally puts polluters over the people we are here to serve. It forces American taxpayers to foot the bill for cleanup while billionaire corporations dump their toxic waste on our communities. This is sick. Now, I'm old enough to remember earlier this year when Republicans slammed President Biden because China was buying our oil.
To sell our oil to China, not just our oil, our reserves. This is our piggy bank in case there's a disaster. They want to keep selling our strategic reserves to China, 950,000 barrels already that President Biden has sold to China.
We need to chart a path back to energy independence and ensure President Biden is not able to sell our critical oil supplies to China or any other rogue nations. President Biden used emergency authorities to sell hundreds of millions of barrels of oil to our enemies.
It seems the fossil fuel industry is on the phone once again asking for another handout, and my Republican friends are eager to oblige. Now they want to make it easier to sell China our gas. You can't make this stuff up. The least productive Congress in history, the most rules failed in a single year. They dragged America to the brink of default twice, almost shut down the government, wasted weeks fighting about who should be speaker, hitting each other in the hallways, and it's all because we should be talking about important issues in this chamber, Mr. Speaker. We should be addressing health care costs, helping Americans build economic security, competing with our adversaries abroad, and investing in our people at home. We just had a shooting in Las Vegas tonight. We should be talking about preventing gun violence in this country. And you have us here talking about how someone tried to go out the wrong door of the Cannon House office building. I mean, honestly, what the hell is wrong with you? Congressman Bowman apologized, and I want to read his statement so we can be clear about what we're talking about here today. Quote, "Today, as I was rushing to make a vote, I came to a door that usually is open for votes, but today would not open. I am embarrassed to admit that I activated the fire alarm, mistakenly thinking it would open the door. I regret this and sincerely apologize for any confusion this caused." He messed up, like many of us do every day. He was rushing to get to votes. And guess what? No one was hurt. No one's life was put in danger. Votes went on like nothing happened. Anyone who works here knows that a fire alarm going off across the street wouldn't impact votes going on here in the Capitol. And I find it terribly ironic that we are talking about censuring Mr. Bowman, yet we never censured any of our colleagues who tried to overturn the election on January 6th, or who failed to respond to a subpoena, or who put our national security in danger by storming a SCIF with their phones. In fact, to the contrary, Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House, held a press conference yesterday about the January 6th video footage. Something he said stuck with me. Quote, "We have to blur some of the people's faces who participated in the events of that day because we don't want them to be retaliated against and charged by the DOJ." End quote. So just to be clear, Republicans want to protect the insurrectionists, shield them from accountability, the people who beat officers, kicked in doors, smashed windows, desecrated this building, and tried to take down our democracy. Not our doors, America's offices, America's windows, and this is America's building that Trump's mob defiled. Speaker Johnson wants to protect the mob, but has us here debating this absurd censure. What a pathetic exercise in retaliation and revenge. What a petty thing it is to bring this garbage to the floor. Sadly, it's just a typical week for this disgraceful Republican majority. With that, I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. There are countless issues we disagree on, countless issues we need to address. And the appropriations process can, in fact, through the power of the purse, address many of those issues. And these bills do that. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, well, these bills are dead on arrival. Well, that's how this process works.
Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are acting like a shutdown is no big deal. Stop it. Stop it. This is not mock Congress. This isn't the model UN. We're talking about real people's lives here. Shutdowns cost taxpayer money. Shutdowns hurt the economy. Shutdowns mean people don't get paid. Shutdowns are bad. Yet Republicans are on the verge of shutting down the government. Now, we have a Democratic president. We have a Democratic Senate. All we need is this Republican House of Representatives to get their act together. But they can't. Their bumbling, incompetent leadership can't even do the basic job of standing up to their extreme members so we can keep the lights on. It might have made sense for them to pass these appropriation bills and send them to the Senate to iron out our differences if it were still June or July. It's September. They've spent months fighting with themselves. And now we are 4 days from our deadline. I mean, have they ever looked at a calendar? Have they ever heard of the concept of scheduling? Have you ever heard of clock management? You don't start a months-long process 4 days before the deadline. But here we are, considering the most extreme, partisan, unhinged MAGA messaging bills this majority could come up with. My colleague from Texas talks about the border, the border, the border. It's an important issue. But these bills cut funding for the border. He cares so much about securing the border that he is willing to, wait for it, defund the border. And then, Madam Speaker, they're not even sending their Homeland Security Appropriations bill to the Senate. What brilliant legislative mind came up with this bright idea? Now, let me explain what this rule does. The House is refusing to send this bill to the Senate until Republicans' extreme immigration bill is signed into law, which is never going to happen. But what will happen, because of all their nonsense, is that the people who actually work to secure the border will not get paid. This is nuts. These bills are chock full of MAGA culture wars. Their agriculture bill takes money away from food assistance for pregnant mothers and newborns. I mean, I could spend all day talking about how awful these bills are. The bottom line is we have 4 days, and I am asking my Republican colleagues, do not shut this government down because you are all fighting with yourselves. Do your job and keep the government open. That shouldn't be too much to ask.
I heard the colleague talk about getting our act together. I would say to my colleague from Massachusetts, how about the Senate and the President get their act together? How about they actually do their job to secure the border of the United States? The gentleman from Massachusetts just blithely swept aside.
You know, it's interesting hearing my colleagues on the other side. Shut down, shut down, shut down. That's all you hear. You know, what about the shutdown that occurred for a COVID virus for over a year and a half? What about the shutdown that kept children out of school for over a year and a half? It's outrageous that here we are on this floor trying to pass legislation to cut spending to put money back in the pocket of the taxpayers. My good friends on the other aisle will pay a price as they are being booed in different parts of the country because of leaving this border open, leaving this country unsecure. And we have never faced this kind of crisis that we face right now, just on that issue alone.
Madam Speaker, the gentleman from South Carolina says we keep on talking about government shutdown, government shutdown. The reason we do is because we listened to you. On September 19th, in the PBS NewsHour interview, you were asked how likely is a shutdown right now, and your response was it's 100%. So, you know, and we've heard that from other members. The gentleman keeps on talking about the border. We believe the border is a serious issue. The border is not open, but, you know, maybe if people think it is open, it's because you guys keep on saying it's open. And you're signaling to people that it's open. It's not. It's not open, and we don't believe it should be open. But we don't view this issue as a political talking point. We want to get results. And my friends on the other side of the aisle voted against an FY23 government funding package that President Biden signed into law that provided Border Patrol with $7.153 billion, a 17% increase from the year before. The funding package provided $65 million for 300 new Border Patrol agents and $60 million for 125 new personnel at every point of entry, $230 million for technology like the autonomous surveillance towers. I mean, does any of that sound like open borders? But here's the kicker. House Republicans voted no. And by the way, Mr. Norman, this bill does nothing about Mr. Mayorkas' salary, but it does cut salaries for people who are working on the Border Patrol agents. And the gentleman from Texas said that he wants the Senate to get their act together. Well, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert on the record a press release from the chair of the Appropriations Committee, U.S. Senator Patty Murray, who just announced that Democrats and Republicans have come to a bipartisan agreement on a continuing resolution. They are talking to each other. You can't even get an agreement amongst Republicans. How pathetic.
We would run all 12 spending bills individually and actually find some savings for the American people. Yet this is another year where the taxpayers' hard-earned dollars are just squandered. Congress has passed all required spending bills only four times in about the 50 years since we're under the current system. Last time Congress actually passed all the bills was 1996, when the U.S. national debt was a staggering $5.2 trillion. And just last week, the debt hit $33 trillion. This is a cycle of perpetual failure, and yes, our citizens are sick of it. Tell me why I got to vote to keep airplanes flying in the United States and also vote to spend money in a war 8,000 miles away. The American people are sick of that failure, that failure theater, Madam Speaker, and I yield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to, I appreciate the gentleman from Pennsylvania complaining about the mismanagement of this House of Representatives. It's reinforcing our message. So he can complain all he wants, but he can't blame Speaker Pelosi, he can't blame Joe Biden, he can't blame anybody but his own leadership. I hate to tell him, but his party is in charge.
My friends, I am extremely in favor of this rule because this rule moves us onto single subject spending bills. And this is the only way to liberate this House and this country from the scourge of governing by continuing resolution and omnibus legislation. It is an insult to our governing authority to have the Senate lash Ukraine funding to the reauthorization of the FAA, and by the way, every other thing in government. The American people know that in our state legislatures throughout this land, there is a maturity and a seriousness to set a top line, balanced budget number, and then appropriate to each of the agencies of government independently. And the fact that we don't do that is not a bug of the system, it's a feature of the system. And the one thing I agree with my Democrat colleagues on is that for the last 8 months, this House has been poorly led. And we own that, and we have to do something about it. And you know what? My Democrat colleagues will have an opportunity to do something about that too. And we will see if they bail out our failed speaker. I yield back.
Madam Speaker, so there's the pattern here that I've seen develop over the years. So when Republicans are in charge, the debt doesn't matter. When Democrats are in charge, all of a sudden the debt is the central issue. But it's funny, you know, that when Donald Trump, who's, I don't know how many indictments he has against him at this particular point, how many dozens of years in jail he faces if he's convicted. When he was president, he racked up added $8 trillion to the debt. And there was silence from the other side of the aisle. So, and that was only in 4 years, by the way.
In the last 10 years, we have spent $3 trillion just on interest on the debt. In the next 10 years, we won't spend $3 trillion on interest. We will spend $10 trillion. For that money, our country gets nothing. No sailor, no soldier, no safety net. We get nothing. Making matters worse, in 7 years, Medicare is insolvent, and in 10 years, Social Security is insolvent. We must get our fiscal house in order. To be honest, these bills will not solve all that ails us, but they are a critically important step towards stopping this runaway train. Business as usual, Madam Speaker, is unacceptable. A yes vote acknowledges that and moves us in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. Business as usual for my Republican friends is more tax cuts for corporations and billionaires and millionaires, slashing programs that help the most vulnerable in our country, and subsidies to big oil companies and more money to big defense contractors. Let me just explain to some of my colleagues, especially the moderate Republicans, if there are any of you left. The Ag Appropriations bill, before the Manager's Amendment, which, by the way, imposed even deeper cuts in some of these programs, slashes WIC by $800 million. It reduces the value for WIC fruit and vegetable vouchers by $1.2 billion, hurting both family and farmers. It guts the Renewable Energy for America program by $500 million. It guts rural electric investments in clean energy and energy efficiency from the Inflation Reduction Act by $1 billion. It eliminates a lifeline that has already helped more than 20,000 distressed farmers who have received assistance from the Inflation Reduction Act. It blocks FDA from acting on important tobacco issues, banning menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars and limiting the nicotine in cigarettes. It blocks the Biden executive orders in diversity, equality, inclusion, and accessibility. It reverses the 2023 FDA decision to allow mifepristone to be dispensed in certified pharmacies with a prescription instead of only in hospital, clinics, and medical offices. But this bill, made worse by a Manager's Amendment, guts food programs, nutrition programs to our kids, to pregnant mothers and newborns. Like, what are you thinking? What sense does that make? How does anybody on that side of the aisle vote for a bill that does that? To my moderate friends, if you're still around, how do you do that? This is unacceptable. And by the way, read the fine print in these bills, in these appropriation bills. Look at the programs they cut.
My colleagues on the other side of the aisle do not care while they watch Secretary Mayorkas completely ignore his duty to secure the border of the United States, leaving us entirely exposed to cartels and to the flood of fentanyl pouring into our communities, while Border Patrol is overwhelmed trying to manage numbers at the border, which is completely avoidable if the Secretary and if the President would actually follow the law.
For the gentleman to say that people on our side of the aisle don't care about the fentanyl problem in this country, we don't care that our constituents are dying, that people are dying in this country, that is offensive. You know, people watching this debate, it's one of the reasons why they despise Congress at this moment, because of the characterization, the characterizations that are made by the gentleman. You know, I'll tell you this, we believe we should fund our border patrol agents. We believe we should do more to confront these issues. We don't use these matters as a political football or political talking point, but to come down here and to say that somehow we don't care, that is offensive. I reserve my time. Mr. Speaker, our Rules Committee meeting last night was an embarrassment. Republicans went on and on about locker rooms, the same creepy stereotypes they leaned on when they tried to stop gay marriage. On and on about fairness, but no mention of the unfairness girls' sports teams face when it comes to unequal resources, unequal pay, and unequal treatment. On and on about safety, but no mention of the #1 reason America's schools are unsafe, gun violence. Our kids are being slaughtered, for God's sakes. Does anybody on the other side even care? Republicans claimed trans people don't even exist, which makes me wonder why they've wasted all our time on their creepy obsession with controlling the lives of people they think aren't even real. Republicans now believe Congress should be empowered to pick and choose which kids should be allowed to play on the soccer team. You can't make this stuff up. What's next? A bill about who can play together at recess? Republican hypocrisy is breathtaking. The truth is that this bill would mean more trans kids, already vulnerable as it is, would be bullied, beaten, and killed. It would deprive trans kids of the opportunity to learn about teamwork, discipline, and sportsmanship. And finally, let me just say to the trans community, you deserve so much better than this. I hope you know that you have allies in Congress and across the country who care about you and who will fight for you. It shouldn't be a radical idea to respect people for who they are. And it shouldn't be a radical idea to love people for who they are. And I say to my Republican colleagues, stop the lies, stop the bigotry, stop the hate, leave kids alone. I urge a no vote on this awful, rotten rule and a no vote on the underlying bill, and I yield back my time.
This legislation would not protect kids. We must remember that this legislation could require female students, athletes, to be subject to invasive genital examinations or forced to disclose their menstruation data. What parent would want their child to go through that? This is a grotesque violation of privacy and the complete opposite of protecting our children. You know what? If Republicans really wanted to protect our girls, they should focus on real issues. The sexual abuse of female and athletes and students goes unreported too often. The U.S. Center for Safe Sports found that 93% of athletes experienced sexual harassment or unwanted contact, and they were too afraid to report it. We must address the real issues that our children face.
HCON Res 9 is a simple resolution denouncing the horrors of socialism in all forms and opposes the implementation of socialist policy here in the United States. We're here to condemn socialism. And let's not play games. We know what socialism is. Socialism, 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 socialism,
Socialism, socialism, socialism, socialism, socialism, socialism. Socialism is socialism, and socialism is always socialism.
socialism, socialism, socialism and communism, socialism and communism.
Socialism, 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 of socialism, the horrors of socialism, horrors of socialism. Socialism is evil.
Socialism, socialism and communism, socialism, 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 socialism.
Socialism, socialism.
I'm confused, Mr. Speaker, because after months of hearing from Republicans that they want to address bread and butter issues, that they want to do something about the issues facing everyday people in this country, the issues that we hear about when we go home, we are here instead wasting the time of this body with two useless, stupid political stunts which are about dividing people, distracting people. Make no mistake, these are Fox News talking points, Tucker Carlson sound bites, press releases. That's what they are. And let me just say to my Democratic colleagues, vote however you want on this. Doesn't matter because it does nothing at all. Oh, it denounces Pol Pot. Of course we denounce Pol Pot. I've never heard anyone say anything nice about him. We denounce Stalin. Didn't know that needed a resolution. We denounce Kim Jong-un. Well, not all of us, actually. Because, in fact, if I remember correctly, it was the leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, who said he fell in love with him, who talked about how talented he was, who called him a great leader, who bragged about their chemistry. Did any of my Republican colleagues speak up when a brutal tyrant named this resolution was applauded on the world stage by the President of the United States? Did they denounce that? You know what's interesting, Mr. Speaker? One name I noticed was missing from this list, Vladimir Putin. Like, what's up with that? I mean, we condemn Lenin and Stalin, but not Putin? Is that like a Trump thing? Did he put in a call? Seriously, why is Putin left out? We even tried to include an amendment to clarify that the language here does not imply cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And every Republican, every single Republican on the Rules Committee voted no. So there's our answer. There's our answer. Republicans refuse to condemn anti-Semitism. Republicans refuse to add an amendment condemning Nazis to the socialism resolution. Republicans have been silent while members of their conference say things that are blatantly anti-Semitic and appear beside Holocaust deniers and bigots. These are awful, awful bills designed to divide and distract people. And I get it. I mean, I get why. I'd want to divide and distract people too if my agenda was as extreme as the agenda that the Speaker of the House is now advocating for. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate our Republican colleagues on finally releasing their big plan to end inflation. What a day. We've all been home for 2 weeks. We know inflation is a big problem. We hear about it at the supermarket. We see it in our communities. It's a global problem impacting every single country. Now, over the last 2 years, Democrats here in the House, alongside President Biden, have taken aggressive action to fight inflation and lower prices. And at every step, Republicans have voted no, no, no. At every step, they've boasted about their own alternative, comprehensive plan to stop inflation in its tracks. It's got to be big. It's got to be really big. Can't wait to read it. Wow, wait until you hear about the Republican plan to stop inflation in its tracks. But forgive me if I'm confused today, because after months of waiting with bated breath, after all your announcements and after all your press releases and all your tweets about inflation, we finally find out that your big plan, what your big plan to stop inflation really is. Your big bill to address the American people's number one concern. It's a report. More government paperwork. Great. I mean, will people be able to print out the report and trade it in for cheaper gas or lower food prices? Because unless they can, and I'm not an economist here, but I don't think this is going to make a difference. The bill, and I hesitate to call it a bill because it might as well be a tweet or a press release, does nothing. Maybe it should be an amendment to an actual bill that fights inflation. Just a suggestion. But don't try to pass this off as a real plan. This is what happens when you try to write a bill for Twitter instead of a bill that actually helps everyday people. And the audacity, the sheer audacity of saying that all this inflation was caused by President Biden, when the guy before him added nearly $8 trillion to the national debt, when the guy before him presided over a 39% increase in the national debt, when the guy before him accumulated 25% of the total debt in American history. The hypocrisy is incredible. Now, just contrast that with what Democrats did to rein in inflation and lower costs for people. Democrats capped insulin at $35 per month. Democrats reduced the price of prescription drugs for seniors. Democrats, for the first time in history, are making sure that Big Pharma faces penalties for raising their prices faster than inflation. Democrats are saving families money with special tax credits for making good investments. All things that Republicans voted against. 100% of Republicans voted against reducing prescription drug prices. 100% of them voted against cheaper insulin for our senior citizens. 100% of them voted against lower gas prices. I guess we could give them some credit because only 95% of them voted against lower food prices. Now maybe, and hear me out here, maybe Republicans don't want to solve inflation. Maybe they know that addressing inflation means taking on greedy CEOs, big oil and billionaire corporations. Maybe they know it means standing up to Putin, who is driving up energy prices with his war in Ukraine. Maybe Republicans are too scared to fight inflation. So there's a difference here. There's a difference here, and it's a big one. Democrats are fighting for the families being hurt by inflation and taking on the greedy corporations who are driving prices up. And Republicans, their solution is to blame Democrats, blame Biden, and write a book report. We have over 1,600 books and more every month pulled from the shelves. They are banned. Democrats put forward amendments to prevent politicians from banning books. They all voted no. Democrats put forward 6 amendments to prevent censorship. They all voted no. And now they're trying to pretend like they have no idea why we would be concerned about book bans. Give me a break. I'm a parent. My wife Lisa and I have gone to countless parent-teacher conferences when our kids were in public school. Both of my sisters are public school teachers. I know how hard they work to involve parents in their kids' education. So don't lecture us. We are parents. We know what this is about. It is about banning books. This bill is going to be weaponized by far-right groups and used to threaten schools with legal action if they don't pull books off the shelves. It's going to force teachers to decide between staying silent and teaching something that certain politicians in their state don't like. It's already happening, for God's sake. Ask the teacher in Iowa who was told that they cannot teach that slavery was wrong. Ask the teacher in Texas who was told that they have to teach, quote, the opposite perspective on the Holocaust. Ask the teacher in Florida who was fired for exposing a book banning spree at the hands of Ron DeSantis that would make the Chinese Communist Party blush. If you don't like a book, don't let your kid read it. But you don't get to tell the rest of us parents what our kids should be allowed to read. Talk to your kids' teachers, run for school board, but don't take away money from schools that fall down on the wrong side of the MAGA culture wars. We gave Republicans dozens of chances to amend this bill and make it better to address the actual issues that our schools face. They voted no on all of them. Get this, they voted no on getting lead pipes out of schools. They actually voted no on that. They care more about getting Rosa Parks out of our schools than lead pipes, and I think that says it all. So never in my life did I think I would see such a reprehensible, disgraceful bill come to the floor. We should trust parents and teachers and students to think for themselves without having toxic MAGA culture wars shoved down their throats by Republicans in Congress. Vote no on this awful rule and on this awful bill, and I yield back my time. Mr. Speaker, we are here today to consider a rule for H.R. 1, a bill that might as well be called the Polluters Over People Act. And it's yet another example of how this majority, instead of helping everyday Americans, is doing the bidding of their deep-pocketed friends. Time after time after time, Republicans continue to put politics over people, and it shows. Anyone who spends 2 seconds reading this bill can see that it is a dirty energy, pro-polluter plan that would drag our economy back decades. This bill puts polluters over people. It makes it easier for companies to strip public lands of their resources and harder to hold corporate polluters accountable for the mess that they make. It gives more handouts to big oil, as if the industry's CEOs and shareholders haven't already raked in enough money. Record profits over the last few years. It guts half a century of environmental protections that ensure the air we breathe and the water we drink is clean. And it sets our country back as the rest of the world moves towards a clean energy future. There will be plenty of time for us to talk about all the damage the Polluters Over People Act could do to our country and communities. Their bill literally puts polluters over the people we are here to serve. It forces American taxpayers to foot the bill for cleanup while billionaire corporations dump their toxic waste on our communities. This is sick. Look at what is happening to our planet, Mr. Speaker. Year after year, the warmest ever recorded. Species going extinct at rates not seen in millions of years. Sea levels rising and coastal communities feeling the impacts. Farmers struggling to cope with changing seasons. Unprecedented droughts and crop failures. And the answer from my Republican friends is more fossil fuels, more pollution, more drilling, more toxic waste dumped into our communities, more giveaways for big oil, and nothing, not a single thing to lower energy prices. This bill might as well put ExxonMobil and Chevron in charge of our response to climate change. It might as well put Norfolk Southern in charge of chemical safety. It is a terrible bill that will shackle us to a dirty fossil fuels for generations to come. And I urge a no vote on the rule and the underlying legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, we are about to debate H.R. 2, a horrible immigration bill that betrays our values, that hurts our farmers, that makes it easier to put fentanyl on our streets. And we're told it was rewritten in a back room in the Speaker's office. I have yet to see the rewrite. In fact, I haven't even heard a description of what was changed. And I want to say for the record From a process standpoint, this is as bad as it gets. My friends should be ashamed of themselves. But wait, there's even more. I wasn't planning to speak today, but I have to point out the ridiculous hypocrisy of what's going on. Republicans are here on the floor with straight faces, acting like unemployment insurance fraud is one of the top problems in America. They ignore billionaires who pay no taxes, but they want us to believe there's an unemployment insurance crime spree. And so here we are. They're going after farmers and veterans, after workers and families that needed help during the pandemic, while at the same time a sitting member of the House Republican Conference was indicted in federal court this morning for unemployment fraud. Let me repeat that. We have a member of this body, a member of this Republican conference, a key swing vote on their debt ceiling bill, a key swing vote to secure Kevin McCarthy's speakership, who this morning was in federal custody for, let me quote this from the indictment, falsely claiming to be unemployed while he was making $120,000 a year. And here's the bottom line. The modern GOP has become the party of corruption and crime. It's all about power for them. They put their own power above the people we represent. Their front runner for president is a sexual abuser and has been indicted for his illegal hush money payments to cover up his affair. They won't denounce it. Their key swing vote was in federal custody for allegedly stealing unemployment benefits and lying to Congress, and they won't kick him out. They want to gut the Office of Congressional Ethics, and they want to make it easier for rich people to cheat on their taxes. And now they want to pass a bill that would make it easier for George Santos to get away with fraud. Forget honor, forget principles, forget integrity. All they care about is power at any cost. It is disgraceful, it is shameful, it is wrong, and I urge a no vote on this rule and the underlying bill. Mr. Speaker, with less than a week from default, we have been rushed back to Washington because Republicans decided they wanted to waste months playing games with the debt limit. They said if Democrats and President Biden didn't give House Republicans everything they wanted, they were prepared to push the entire economy off a cliff, causing catastrophic, lasting, irreparable damage to America, even though the GOP voted 3 times to prevent default when Donald Trump was president, even though 97% of the debt was accumulated before President Biden took office, and over a quarter of the debt was accumulated under Donald Trump. Even though Republicans had no problem adding trillions to the debt with their giveaways to big oil and to Wall Street CEOs and lavish tax cuts for the very rich, now they choose to play Russian roulette with our economy. But at the end of the day, we should not be making trade-offs between which vulnerable population gets to eat. I have a hard time understanding why we are kicking up to 700,000 older adults off of SNAP. It is just cruel. Food and hunger should not be a partisan issue. It is a human issue. But Republicans don't care who they hurt. We have over 30 million people in this country who do not know where their next meal will come from. And the current SNAP benefit, on average, $6 per person per day. That's $2 per meal. The majority of people on SNAP who can work do work. And we also know that work requirements do not work. In February 2021, a report entitled The Effects of Changing SNAP Work Requirements on Health and Employment Outcomes of Able-Bodied Adults Without Dependents, exactly what we're talking about here today. It was reported that losing SNAP made people less healthy and had no significant change in employment status. Again, work requirements do not work. But by the way, you know, if my Republican colleagues don't believe me, they could have held a hearing. They could have held a hearing in the Agriculture Committee or in the Nutrition Subcommittee. They didn't hold a single hearing on this issue. Not one. They have no clue who this will adversely impact. And I don't even think they care. You would think that we want to go into this knowing exactly how this legislation would affect our constituents. But they didn't even have time for a hearing. And here's the kicker, Mr. Speaker, and you got to love them. But many of the people in this chamber who are trying to take food away from struggling Americans are the same people who had their PPP loans forgiven. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle received hundreds of thousands of dollars, some millions of dollars in taxpayer dollars that were used to forgive some of their loans. They had no problem with that. They just shrugged that off. But they say we cannot afford to help make sure that families can put food on the table. It is ridiculous. And I also have issues with the anti-environmental language in the deal. The bill slashes key NEPA protections, approves the Mountain Valley Pipeline. It doesn't include transmission reform. By weaponizing the debt ceiling, Republicans are establishing a precedent that will haunt us forever. That one party can use the full faith and credit of the United States as a hostage to pass their wildly unpopular ideas that they could not get done through the normal legislative process. It's a lousy, lousy, lousy way to govern. And let me conclude by saying that in this Republican-led Congress, it has become unfashionable to worry about the poor and the vulnerable, to believe in the principle that we should bring everyone along, that we must meet the needs of the many, not just of the few. Mr. Speaker, our goal should be to elevate people, not demean them. And the policies being advocated and forced upon us by my Republican friends do not reflect my values. And it is sad that for them, solving problems and uplifting all people apparently is not their mission. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time. Is this really the best we can do with all the challenges that we face in this country and around the world? Meanwhile, our constituents are begging us, they're pleading with us to do something about gun violence in this country. And what do Republicans do? How do they respond? By bringing to the floor a bill that makes it easier for the next mass shooter to kill more people. It is sick. 9 people outside a bar in Dayton in 2019. 10 people, including a police officer at a grocery store in Boulder in 2021. 5 people in an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs in 2022. 6 people, including children, at a school in Nashville just a few months ago. What do they all have in common? They were all killed by mass shooters who used stabilizing braces. And by the way, the ATF rule that the Republicans are trying to overturn, contrary to what they say, doesn't even make stabilizing braces illegal. It doesn't ban them. All it does is it says that you need to register braces because they are used in a lot of mass shootings. But for Republicans, any amount of common sense gun safety regulation is too much. Why? Why? Because the NRA says so. Our kids are being slaughtered, for God's sake. Does anyone care? Do my Republican colleagues care at all that America's parents stay up wondering whether our kids will be the next one shot at a school or at a mall or at a movie theater or at their own graduation? People come up to me all the time and they ask me, why can't Democrats and Republicans just work together? I tell them I wish we could. There was a time when we did. I say to them, go online and Google the bills that Republicans are bringing to the floor and ask yourself why Republicans oppose background checks on a gun accessory that mass shooters use to kill people. Ask yourself if it's right that this bill was introduced by a Republican member of Congress, and you got to love this, who owns a gun store and makes millions of dollars by selling guns and these types of gun accessories that mass shooters use to kill people. Ask yourself if it makes sense that the only reason this bill is even on the floor is because Speaker McCarthy isn't even in charge of the House schedule anymore. The far, far, far right is. If you want to know why we can't have real action when it comes to gun safety, follow the money. Follow the money. In the last decade, the NRA has spent more than $100 million to help elect Republicans who will support their extreme agenda. Follow the money. It's no surprise that the far right is demanding this bill, but it's a shame. How many more mass shootings need to happen? How many more kids need to die before my Republican colleagues pull their heads out of the sand and realize that the NRA's blood money is not worth the damage that is being done to our country? I wish I were wrong, Mr. Speaker, but sadly the cowardice and the moral bankruptcy on the other side of the aisle seems to know no bounds. between the new concept of power sharing in the House, which really just means that the Speaker is going to have to keep a tiny minority of extremist members happy for the House to be able to function, and the fact that their party's front runner for the 2024 presidential election is being indicted with very serious charges for the second time this afternoon, I'm sorry to say that the Republican Party is a train wreck, and it doesn't bode well for what's to come. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.
And with respect to the solution to the tragic school shootings, some states have taken it upon themselves to allow qualified teachers and staff to carry firearms. Imagine that. They're protected. The children are protected by firearms the same way we're protected here. Why do we sit here and say, oh, we got to do something, and when we sit behind protection and the children aren't?
And Mr. Speaker, before I yield to our next speaker, I just have to say, we heard a lot of words from the gentleman and from other Republicans who speak on these issues. But you know what we don't hear? Any empathy, for the families who have lost loved ones to gun violence. I mean, I began my opening remarks by citing examples of how this accessory was used in mass shootings. Children, mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers lost their lives, were murdered. Police were murdered. Not even any empathy. No acknowledgement that this is a terrible tragedy. Yeah, I mean, all we hear about is don't take away my toys. Don't interfere with my hobby. You can't register any of these things. I thank the gentlelady for yielding so I can vent a little bit. I just saw a roll call story that is reporting that Republicans are pulling their continuing resolution today to weigh more cuts. I mean, are you kidding me? Their crummy CR contained an 8% across-the-board cut in almost every program that helps people. Everything from, medical research, WIC, Head Start, housing, even border security is cut by 8%. The only thing that's exempt is the military budget, the biggest bureaucracy in our government. They're okay with cutting fuel assistance for poor people by 65%. I mean, money to help people able to heat their homes in the winter. They're okay with cutting that, but believe you can't find one penny in savings in a missile system in the Pentagon with huge cost overruns. I mean, it is pathetic. As the Republican whip said, the patients are running the hospital around here. The gentleman from Oklahoma said this is about a negotiation. My Republican friends can't even negotiate with themselves. And we have 11 days to go before there is a shutdown, and they are going in the wrong direction. It is going to become more and more difficult to get to an agreement. So enough.
My friends across the aisle, they'll say nothing to criticize China, by the way. China's coal-fired power plants generate more than 23% of all forms of U.S. energy combined. And they are allowed to increase their emissions through 2030 under the laughable Paris Climate Accords. We could all laugh at this if it wasn't for the devastating effects that Democrats' climate policy has on the working class in America and for our competitive edge on our number one adversary on the world stage, and that is China. With that, I reserve.
Let me just say to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, nobody has been tougher on China than yours truly here. And I take a back seat to no one, and I don't want to be lectured. Madam Speaker, I wasn't going to speak on this rule today, but I feel compelled to say something because I see a pattern developing that I think needs to be called out. And it needs to be called out plain and simple. They are taking their awful appropriation bills on agriculture and foreign policy and now energy and water and legislative branch. And as the gentlelady from Pennsylvania pointed out, they all have these deep cuts. And then they are loading them up with MAGA culture war crap. And the reason I wanted to come down here is that this isn't just about politics. Hate crimes against the LGBTQ community are going up. And my colleagues come to the floor not only failing to denounce that, but advancing ideas which signal to people that it's okay to discriminate, that it's okay to hate. It's sick. I get it. This is popular in the extreme MAGA world, but I thought there were some moderate voices on the other side that might find this as offensive as I do. But I guess I'm wrong. because Republicans continue to blindly come down here and support these hateful policies and vote for them time after time after time. And I just hope that the next speaker, whoever that may be, and maybe we'll find out today, I hope whoever that may be will do a better job of preventing this garbage from coming to the floor. But looking at the Republican Party in 2023,
Gentleman's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, I will yield myself the remaining time on our side.
Recognized.
Mr. Speaker, House Republicans are a minority party that is masquerading as a majority party. And I say that because I think my friends on the other side don't want to actually be in charge anymore. It is easier to be in the minority when you're a Republican. They think all you have to do is vote no on everything. It's harder to be in the majority. And it's especially hard because the Republican Party no longer represents a coherent political ideology that seeks to solve problems or govern. They have normalized dysfunction. We have Republican members of Congress literally assaulting each other in the hallways, threatening to punch people in committee hearings.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big guy.
Oh, stop it.
Is that your solution every
Hold it. No, sit down. Sit down. Okay. You know, you're a United States Senator. Sit down.
Active.
Oh, okay. Sit down, please.
Getting into fights on the House floor and having their supporters threaten each other's families with violence. That is the truth. They have wasted away their majority fighting amongst themselves and acting like babies, focusing on retaliation and revenge, pursuing ridiculous impeachment inquiry sideshows, conditioning aid to our allies on tax cuts for billionaires here at home, screaming about the deficit when they keep passing bills that blow up the deficit. And I say to people watching this at home, you might not agree with Democrats on everything, but we are Team Normal. And Republicans are Team totally off the deep end nuts. I clean that up for the floor, Mr. Speaker, for, civility. Democrats ran this place like professionals, and Republicans are running it into the ground. Democrats fight for the people. Republicans only care about fighting with each other. Democrats behave like adults, and I hope rational, reasonable, moderate Republicans, if any are left, will join us and reject the MAGA extremists who behave like spoiled, rotten children. With that, Mr. Speaker, I urge a held no on this rule, a no on the underlying bills, and I yield back the balance of my time. I want to apologize to the American people. I want to apologize that Republicans are wasting your hard-earned taxpayer money with yet another stupid and meaningless censure resolution instead of doing anything that will help the American people. Jamaal Bowman is a good man, a decent man, a kind man. He was rushing to exit a House office building so he could go vote, and he activated a fire alarm in the process of trying to open the door. Did he destroy government property? No. Did he obstruct an official proceeding? No. Did he wield a deadly weapon? No. Did he assault or injure anyone? No. But did he apologize and take responsibility for his actions? Yes, he did, which is more than we can say for January 6th, when this building was desecrated by an angry mob sent by Trump to overturn an election. And Republican members of this body still act like nothing happened. How disgusting. How offensive it is to the men and women who protect us that my friends on the other side of the aisle continue to act like nothing happened that day. Look, at the end of the day, this has nothing to do with Congressman Bowman, and my friends know that. It is about deflecting from how unhinged this majority is. They had to expel one of their own members last week, for God's sake. The first speaker in history to be ousted. Nothing of any consequence to show for an entire year in the majority. Nothing. You have done nothing. You've wasted time on stupid measures like this. Nothing. Look, this whole exercise is just nuts. For Republicans, it's all about appeasing their orange overlord at Mar-a-Lago who can do no wrong. They don't care about governing. They're unfit to govern. They aren't concerned about the serious and complex issues facing this country, the world, or the people we represent. For them, being in power is all about retaliation and revenge, and the destruction of their perceived enemies. It is time for the Republican Party to grow up. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to waste another second on this meaningless resolution. This is pathetic. The Republicans have turned this chamber into a place where trivial issues get debated passionately and important ones not at all. My friends have done nothing, not a damn thing, for the people that they say they represent. How can anybody on the other side of the aisle go home with a straight face and say that you're representing your constituents? You produce nothing for them. You've turned this place into a joke. It is sad that we are here today, and again, I will end as I began by apologizing to the American people. I urge a no vote on this pathetic, stupid resolution, and I yield back my time.